Greetings, lovely Earthlings. I am Farida, and this is The Slow Dive. I am back to continue our previous roundtable discussion with a dynamic group of women I respect and am inspired by. The first segment of our community roundtable featured award-winning writer, educator, filmmaker Diana Abousaleh, director of creative marketing and board member of San Fernando Valley Refugee Children's Center, Gabriela Lagarda, Berlin-based writer-director Emily Manthei, and intrepid producer-director Samantha K. Henderson. We explored the sense of community by discussing fitting in and feeling seen or unseen. Today, we continue the conversation and dive into more unsavory community and interconnectedness areas such as bullying and cancel culture. I hope the final segment of our first roundtable encourages us to reflect on how we treat and are treated in communities from the smallest to the largest as global citizens. As The Slow Dive is a newbie podcast, and this is our first roundtable, I appreciate our guests being vulnerable and sharing from an authentic place. I don't believe that toxic positivity is constructive as an all-purpose solution for building a community. Positivity is crucial, but one should consider not minimizing anyone's experience. Some of the heavy lifting in speaking and connecting with the heart is done by first being vulnerable to tough conversations, holding space, and knowing that the intent is to resolve the issue or better understand one another's views and foster greater empathy. If our goal is peaceful coexistence, even when the world seems inflamed and more divisive than ever, we must first agree that we owe to each other to hear one another out from the heart space, using the heart-mind coherence and being honest with our intent. How many times have you come across an individual that has their mind and heart made up and closed? It's like talking to a wall, almost a stone person. I assure you they have a heart. But whatever has accumulated from experiences has somehow constricted their empathy. In those situations, one can start small and just offer space to hear one another out. Of course, with hateful rhetoric and speech that is designed to dehumanize or vilify fellow Earthlings can be hard to dismantle. But I think with small steps and intent, we can start the process. You know, understanding and empathy is a process, both individually and in groups. We have to be open and receptive with ourselves and with others. We may not achieve world peace by 2030, but maybe we can achieve more peace and understanding in our own way. Let's continue our conversation now. Bystanders and bullies, how much responsibility do we have as a society to intervene in crises? Are we losing our sensitivity chip? How far can you take it? So if we see something happening, how much should we intervene or should we not?
I spoke earlier about being that person that always wanted to step in when I saw someone being bullied or if I felt they were being mistreated. So it was easy to speak up for myself, but I also would speak up for other people. And let's be real, I had to learn that you can't use physical force. As an adult, it's just speaking up like, hey, you can't do that, or let's help this person. But I also have learned through my experiences that not everyone wants to be helped. So I think the first step is to try to understand the circumstances and situation a little better and act appropriately. And I'll try to explain what I mean. If a child is being mistreated and it's within my vision or my knowledge, I'm going to act because that person, that child can't really stand up for themselves if it's against an adult, right? So I think that without trying to gain too much more understanding of the circumstances, I'm going to at least check in. Are you okay? Now, when we're talking about an adult and maybe it's similar circumstances, maybe someone's just talking to them a little rough in front of me, or handling another adult a little rougher than I think is appropriate, I might stand back and watch a little bit to get an understanding of what are the circumstances. And then I will make a determination if I personally need to act. Is this person in imminent danger? Do I need to call the police? Is there something that I could do to diffuse the situation? Or do I just need to stay out of it for whatever reason? Maybe it's personal safety or the safety of others in the circumstance at the time. All that to say is I do find that we as individuals are responsible for the collective, and we should not allow bullying. We should stand up and intervene sometimes, but I also think that we have to do it the right way, diffusing hostile situations if we can, calling in the police. And from my standpoint, that's a hard one because sometimes they make situations worse. And we've seen that time and time again. But then also, does a person want to be assisted or saved? Because again, I don't want to suffer negative consequences for doing the right thing. Farida, I think this question is a lot tougher to answer than I would hope. There are so many other factors to consider.
No, this is good. This is a conversation. Diana, you wanted to add to that?
I love what you said, Samantha, about doing it the right way, because that's a key point there, because that requires a lot of reflection versus impulse. I have that impulse of I want to do the right thing. I want to help people. It's hard because it requires reflection of I have to do it the right way. A lot of things could go wrong, My mindset has shifted. I thought that we had a huge responsibility to intervene in times of struggle when you see something wrong, okay, just to put it in general terms. But there's always something wrong. Nowadays, there's always something going wrong. I always struggle with it. It's very overwhelming. In the past, maybe 8 months, I get very overwhelmed because I get very attached to seeing all these things happening around the world. I'm just one person. How can I help from all the way halfway around the world? Just seeing all this suffering, right? I'm not going to get too political, but there's suffering everywhere, right? I get overwhelmed. I get depressed, just not knowing how one person, just me, Deanna, how can I help? I used to think it was my responsibility to intervene, to do something about it, but it's really not. I started to think about it more in this spiritual way, about accepting the duality of life, the good and the bad and the ugly and the suffering, because that's life. To me, it's all one. There's good, there's bad, there's suffering, there's joy, there's happiness. And what I can do about it is, as a creative person, is maybe just write about it, write about the suffering. Maybe one day someone will see it through our stories, through our art. And that's one thing I can do as a creative person. But I'm not going to make it go away. I'm not going to make the pain and the death and all the suffering go away.
Thank you for sharing, both Sam and Diana. Should we intervene if we see bullying? A few examples. Workplace bullying. We see a domestic violence situation, stranger being attacked on a subway train, being name called. Do we as a society have to say something? Or do you think we're experiencing compassion fatigue? Because we're so immersed in so much that's happening that we're almost, compassion fatigue, apathetic, desensitized. Or do you think it's because the world as a whole is suffering? Maybe in our parents' generation, they had their issues, but this time, this snapshot where we are now, there's so much more happening in our own lives, in our own countries, that immersing ourselves in more stuff, we feel helpless. And if everyone, and I'm not saying right or wrong, this is just a discussion, if everyone felt I don't know, how can I intervene? Whether that's globally on a geopolitical way, should we go and help another country? Should we support another regime? Should we do this? Or if it's something as simple as you see someone at work being harassed, or something similar, as you have a friend that you know is in a toxic relationship but is not ready to leave, and you can't make that decision for that friend. So you're like, what should I do now? Do I just let someone suffer? Do I feel responsibility? How do we make those decisions on where we should intervene or not? Or do you think that's what's happening? Or do you think we're all experiencing immense compassion fatigue because overall the world is just like burning so awful, and that we all feel like there's just too much, and I just don't have the bandwidth and energy, and I just got to take care of myself and my family that's in front of me right now, and from then I can go on and help others? And is that the problem? I don't know. Just a discussion. Go ahead, Gabby.
I identified with a lot of things that Samantha and Diana mentioned, because it seems like we're talking about bullying in different perspectives. So we're talking about, I think Samantha was more on like, something's happening in front of you. Should you intervene? Is that person in real need, or are they going to stand up for themselves? Do they have the ability or not? And then I think Diana was more about the overwhelming, state of the world, and bullies at an international level, which is huge, right? And we can feel so small in front of that adversity, I guess. And so my thoughts, actually, when you mentioned bullying, I immediately went like into a work setting, or like a set, or like an office, or anywhere, like throughout my life and the different jobs I've had. And I was talking to a friend of mine. We went hiking this morning, and we were talking about bullies and how much we dislike, bullies. We were talking specifically at work, and these are microaggressions on a daily basis. These are comments that may not look like what Samantha was saying, like someone's going to get hurt. Like it might look more subtle, right? And it's hard for us also, as Diana was saying, if you want to intervene in the right way, because I don't know if there's a right way or wrong way, but like if you want to intervene, it might take a little bit for you to think and like reflect, okay, should I go in? What should I say? And sometimes, especially in a work setting, or especially out on the street, things happen so quickly. You don't have time to think. And you also don't want to be impulsive. So it's a crazy balance. You have to put that in a balance. How quickly can you take enough time to reflect if it's appropriate or not for you to intervene? So it's crazy to think about it, but it happens. In my experience, I've experienced all three. So like workplace, also physical things happening, in person, but also at a global scale. And what I've recently learned is that, on talking about physically somebody in front of me, like mistreating someone else, I have not been quick enough to react, for the fear of also getting hurt or making it worse, etc. But with experience, I feel like I have said to myself, next time, if I see something like that, I will do this. So I think with time, I've come to conclusions of what would I do. And then slowly, if these situations happen again, I get to react a little bit faster. And the same at work. I have seen, I guess, verbal abuse. I have seen harassment and many other things where at the moment I get paralyzed and don't know how to react, and maybe scared. And so over the years, I've learned to, like Samantha was saying, diffuse the situation, or get myself out of a situation, or help another, colleague out of certain situations. So I guess it takes, unfortunately, a few times for us to be, I guess, smart enough or quick to make smart decisions in the moment. That's my experience. And when it comes to like a global scale, I have also, dealt with this, and it is, I think, compassion fatigue as well, especially me being in, the fundraising committee at an organization, at a nonprofit. It is hard to get people's attention, and hard for us to focus as well, because it's just so many things happening in the moment. Of course, it gets overwhelming. What I have done or thought about, and what I do for myself, is, if difficult situations are being created all over the world, right, by people that don't have the best intentions, people who are seeking money and power, etc., I think I want to do the opposite. And the opposite is not go help the person that is the victim of that situation. But in my opinion, the positive is to create spaces like this, what you, Farida, and Samantha are creating, to create that bonding experience. Because the more that we think that we're alone and we're the only ones that think that way, like Diana was like, oh my gosh, I get, frustrated, all these things are happening. But we think we are the only ones that feel that. But no, so many of us feel the same way. And I feel like if we create those bonds or spaces where we can share and create spaces where we can be more positive and create safe environments for those who might have felt unsafe before, I think that's the way to counteract that craziness happening out there. We can't stop it. And it's really, I don't know if it's ever going to end. So we might as well just be creative in making safer environments for us, for others, and those close to us. Of course, we can always donate to like organizations in other parts of the world, but the more that we do that at home, the stronger we will feel as a community, and it'll just keep expanding. That's just my thought.
No, I love that. No, I think the antidote to all the ignorance and separation and the vilifying is to be more open and to have open dialogue and to be more in community. Because I think it's when people are strangers, we always fear what we don't know. And everything's outside of us. And this is not like a litmus test, but I've noticed this as I gotten older. When I was younger, I didn't really pay attention, but I've always been someone who had a very diverse group of friends. Nationalities, race, religions, atheists, agnostics, sexual orientations, none of that mattered to me. Maybe it was just because of the classes I was in. I was at oddball in school. Who knows? Whatever. But I always had a diverse, even, when I got married, my wedding guest list was like, just like, people were like, how do you know so many different people from, it was wild. And I've always been like that. And I never thought of that as an issue. But now I'm starting to observe people's friends group, like, especially when you live in a country like in America, where there's or in a larger populated city in America, which is so diverse. And then you look at like, you go to someone's dinner party and everybody looks like them. Everyone's like, and I feel like, no, I'm not throwing shade at them. They're not bad people. But then you think like, why are we in these silos? Like, okay, for example, I'm Muslim American, first generation. I have Ramadan. We practice it. I have no issue telling my non-Muslim friends and people who don't even believe in God, it's Ramadan. I'm going to be like not available at this time. It's cool. A few years ago, I had a interfaith party at my mosque and we had everybody there. It was not an issue. But then, and please, if anyone hears this and we actually end up using this, I've gone to some events like this. Everybody looks like me. Everybody sounds like me. We all have so much in common. And although that's great, because that's what community is, we feel accepted. We feel like, oh, that reminds me of my values. We're reinforced. But at the same time, that same thing can go to extreme of where then we get so comfortable being with only people that look like us, sound like us, think like us, that then we become closed off. And maybe if we're not in the right space or mind, that can also, I don't know, incite other divisive practices and people might just feel more comfortable. And I think I never noticed this in my 20s. Maybe it was because I was just like really just walking through life without a care. But like the older I get, I'm like, what are people's friends group say about them? Who you break bread with, who you have coffee with, like how diverse is your group outside of work? Because, like there's so many heated opinions about, diversity, equity, inclusion. There's people that are for it. There are people that are like, oh, that's not great. We're all humans. But whatever that is, work is one sampling. Our creative community is one sampling. But who we choose to break bread with, does everybody look like you? I mean, I get it if you're like in UAE or Pakistan or India, and like majority of the people are of the same faith or same culture. But when I look at a more homogenized, mixed up country like America, especially in Los Angeles, and I see people just kind of hanging out with only their quote type of people, I wonder, is that maybe that's intentional, maybe that's not, but I do think that adds to us being more separated than unified. And yes, so what Gabby was saying, the antidote is to be proactive and just sharing more vulnerable spaces like this. But I don't know if anyone has thought about that before. Do you think a person's friends group is representative of their open-mindedness? Does that hinder or help them? Moving on to the next topic, cancel culture and redemption. Do you think people can change, and can we ever really come back from something? Do you think that should be so heavy-handed, or do you think people should be given a second chance for, being ignorant and stupid and not knowing better, but then coming back and being like, you know what, I just didn't know any better? Why do we have such a cancel culture right now? And what does that say in forms of community? Also, mean girls and women. I'm going to say this because this is something that's not said a lot out loud in women's spaces, because we all, I won't say we all, but I think a lot of us expect fellow women and females to be like, oh, mean girls don't exist. There's no like competition or jealousy or any of that. There's this amazing sisterhood. But sometimes all that does exist. And that's something about community, I think, as well. I don't know. I'm in a lot of different professional groups that are centered around women because it's a community that helps elevate narratives and films, and it helps open doors professionally. So it's, of course, to give more opportunity to women. But in those same groups, although the reasons that we're there is for positivity, to make space for us to have more representation in the industry, sometimes, and this is not any particular group, this is just to say group dynamics, human psychology, I feel like sometimes we kind of glaze over. We act like I'll give you an example. So I was talking to somebody in a group meeting, something like this, and I kind of referenced how someone was being a mean girl. Basically, that was very petty behavior, very jealous behavior. This person, it was not professional, and it's kind of not cool because we're all women. We're all like, we all want the same stuff professionally, so we should be in a supportive atmosphere. But then you have a couple of people that come in and like make you feel like, oh, you have to defend your point of view, and they are antagonistic. And everyone's like, oh, don't do that. That's not how women are. But I'm like, no, that's not true. It's in human nature, men and women. We all exist, and we all have those. Not all of us are like amazing, and some of us are going to be like that. I feel like sometimes we know it exists. There is a covert thing, but we let it go because we're in women's spaces. So we're like, oh, well, we're in women's spaces. So yeah, I know that person's being completely petty and they copied me, or they were, coming in to disrupt this project. They sabotaged my promotion. It's totally like that friend that you have to watch closer, but I'm not going to say it out loud. That makes me seem petty. But it's almost like not recognizing it and letting someone get away with it. And these are very uncomfortable conversations I found to have with women, because women also turn against women. And it's not to say that women are all like flowers and great, like they're all amazing angels that just, walk through life being peacemakers. No. Has anyone encountered women and mean girls and jealousy and competition and found yourself like giving females passes because you're like, well, I'm a woman too. I don't want to say that. But then that's happening within your system, and that's divisive. Yes.
I think that it is true that women can be very passive aggressive. There's something about the way that we are nurtured to tell us to hold down things, to go for harmony in the group, that leads to a suppression of your actual thoughts and feelings, and maybe a lack of healthy conflict resolution, or a healthy idea that conflict can be a good thing sometimes. So I can see one version of this mean girl persona that is just the passive aggressive, just gonna sort of gaslight you in various ways. And that and that goes to what you're saying about people not wanting to speak this out loud. That just continues our passive aggressive, like, oh, I can recognize that, but I'm not going to be the one to say it kind of thing. To kind of go back to your previous question about cancel culture, I absolutely believe that people can change. I think that's sort of baked into any sort of religious persuasion. is the idea that people can change, people can get better. I mean, it's baked into psychology as well. The whole idea of going to therapy is that you can improve in whatever the situation, the emotional, psychological, human situation that you're in. And I think part of overcoming mean girl or like female jealousy is the part that we have to improve is our communication with each other, our openness of communication, our ability to confront each other in a loving way. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to call you out in front of 75 people. It can be face to face, in person, hopefully using nonviolent communication tools if you know them.
Thank you for saying that. I knew I wasn't the only one. Because I think that's so difficult to say out loud for me, because I think not all women, but some of us have like these, like, we want to be included. And there's like these teenage people pleasers inside of us that we're like, oh, we're just a part of a community. So I'm not going to say that. But at the same time, that one person, I mean, you got to have accountability for it, because then it's covert and it repeats that pattern, and that bully then goes on to bully other people. And then you're like, oh gosh. Yeah. Thank you for responding to that. Because, yeah. Are there spaces you don't feel you belong in, and why? Is that time now where you don't know where to place yourself? And I'll give you an example. I was invited to a dinner party and didn't tell me that everyone that was going to be there was married with kids. You know, I didn't know anybody. She didn't tell me to bring a +1, anything. And she was busy being the host. I'm usually not a socially awkward person. I am awkward in general, but not that socially awkward. But I went there and I was like, oh, hey, you know, this is great. Thank you for having me. Everybody was there with their husband or their spouse or their partner or whatever. So now I'm having to navigate this new space. And this is why I'm going to give you my personal example. And if this applies to any of you guys, it doesn't have to be about marriage or anything. It could be anywhere where you don't feel like you fit in right now, or that liminal space that we like to talk about, that transitional space. What does it feel like? Like, for example, I have my married friends. I have my married mom friends. I have my single, not married, no children friends. I have my single friends over 50, never been married friends. I have these like different groups of friends. And the single solitary ones, we have no problem hanging out with everybody. And the married ones don't invite us anymore because, like, well, you're no longer married. So now you're out of the circle, or you don't have kids. So you're like, okay, now I'm hanging out with a bunch of younger people because they're not married and they don't have kids and they can still relate. It's a really weird space to be in. So how do you navigate those spaces?
Yeah. So let me start by saying that I am socially awkward at the parties. Just because I don't like small talk. I'd just rather skip the small talk. And I think I'm like the typical like introvert writer. Like in the past, I feel like I've always tried to fit into places that I don't belong. I think it's like that multicultural background and moving around a lot growing up. Like I've always felt like I'm not like Hispanic enough for like the Latinos, and then not Arab enough for the Arabs. So it's like I've always tried to like fit in with like one culture or the other, until I realized, like, you know what, like, screw it. I'm just gonna be myself, and I don't have to find this space to fit into. And again, I think I mentioned this before, but like that's the reason why like I love writing, because like I'm like, I don't see this in, like, I never saw this growing up in Hollywood, like this very like specific multicultural experience. So I'm like, so I need to focus on that. I'm going to create that. I find like new communities that I feel more safe with and at peace with. As we grow up, like our circle of friends gets smaller. And I didn't think that was going to happen to me. I don't know why. I guess I thought that was special. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep all my friends. But you just have, I have different friend groups, and I'm not really attached to, like, I used to worry a lot. Like, I'm like, what if we're not friends in like, 10 years, or like, what if they don't invite me to something? Or it's like, just cultivating that sense of like detachment, like, that's life. And, if this friend is like now married with kids, it's normal that they're going to have like different friend groups and a different lifestyle. So it's just about kind of letting go of like the expectations that you had, you know, maybe 5 years ago of what a friendship or like a relationship should be like.
I love that. Gabby?
I think Dana said something very key, the attachment, right? I feel like, and that goes with what you said, Farida. I'm going through this phase, and it's probably related to what you're saying, you both are saying, where we identify ourselves with a marital status, with a group of friends, with a job, with many things that we attach ourselves to. And we think that is who we are. At least for me, I thought that many of the things that I was doing was a reflection of who I was. Yes, of course, the decisions I make reflects who I am and my character, but that is not all of who I am. And the detaching myself of many things has been such a process. I don't know if Diana, you relate, but I have been detaching myself of things that don't no longer serve me or are no longer a part of my life. And acceptance is it's a difficult process, really. Accepting you're in a different situation, I'm in a different situation. I need to reinvent myself and be okay with who I am. I think the process of being comfortable or uncomfortable in a setting, it's also, I think, a way of helping us being comfortable with ourselves or discovering who we are in this new stage of our lives, right? So if I feel comfortable with who I am, then at some point I'll feel confident enough to make friends, new friends. You know, I have to move because of a situation, I'll make new friends. Or I'll, go to a class and talk to people there. Maybe not all of us are extroverts and it takes a little bit more time, but I think if we feel comfortable on our own, then we will feel comfortable in different settings. And it takes a while to adapt, but that resilience will make us stronger. And it's a process. Like life is ever changing. So we will always have to adapt to one thing or the other. But that is to me has been key. Just detaching myself from ideas, from friendships that no longer serve me, from just labels, I guess. That has helped me feel more comfortable with the person that I am, not identifying myself with any label, just like I am me at this moment, period. Like I'm just not putting any words or labels to it. And so anyway, I think that's key. And if we do that, we'll not fit in everywhere, but at least feel comfortable, being ourselves.
Sam, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so this is more of a comment because I don't think that I could restate Diana or Gabby's comments any better than they have. I relate to being an introvert, although I feel like I'm a socialized introvert because of my family structure and dynamics. But I always tell people that if 100% of the people and spaces that I come across like me, accept me, I think I might be doing life wrong. So I always take this attitude that I'm going to be me, I'm me, and I'm going to be in the space that I'm in, and I could do what I do, and I'll either be accepted or not. Now, depending on the circumstances, it's more important that you find some mutual respect from at least one other person, right? Because maybe it's for, social. Well, I don't want to talk about social, but maybe it's for like a job. Having that person interview you is kind of important that they like you. But if they don't, there's another opportunity somewhere else, right? If everyone in the world just thinks I'm so likable, then something must be wrong with me. Like maybe I'm people pleasing, and that's not good. That's not going to be something that I could sustain forever. Eventually, the true Sam will come out. So if you feel like, you're not being accepted, I'm going to say that it's quite okay for that to be true. Whether it is true or not, it's quite okay, because I don't think we're meant to be accepted everywhere we go and by everyone we come across. Gabby spoke about just being comfortable with yourself. I think I'm saying the same thing, but just in a different way. Be comfortable with yourself, accept yourself, love yourself. And then a lot of the other stuff that we worry about just doesn't matter anymore. Or maybe it doesn't matter as much. Or maybe it just becomes that much easier to navigate these social constructs that we have to deal with all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Samantha, I just want all of that energy that you have about not being liked, because I find myself as a total people pleaser sometimes. But I would say I went through a big life transition when I moved to Germany, because I had told myself this story my whole life. Both of my parents have German migrant backgrounds. So, speaking of people growing up all in the same community of people just like them, my entire family background is some version of German. So I kind of had this idea that moving to Germany, especially like I knew about Berlin, I really liked Berlin. I thought, oh, I will fit in there. Well, that's just not true. That not only am I not German, I'm like several generations removed of German. And not only that, the Germany that I know that my ancestors came from is now part of Poland, so that's also not Germany. So that was all a very kind of rude awakening. And it took me the first couple of years that I moved here, I was learning German. I was trying to like fit in with the Germans, learn the German habits. And the more I tried, the more I found that I was just not German in a variety of ways. One thing that I've realized that makes me really not German is that Germans love to criticize you, whatever you're doing, just like on the street. Oh, you're riding your bicycle on the sidewalk. You're not supposed to do that. Like anything that you do, just like a random stranger. Oh, you're crossing in the crosswalk when it's not green. You're not supposed to do that. And this energy of Germans, at first I would try to do everything the way that they wanted me to do it. And I went through like a real crisis of ego loss. Like, how do I become this way? And actually, I spent like 2 years following this psychological performance group and making a documentary about them and like asking all of these questions about. I just finally, I think as we went through the pandemic, and to your point, Deanna and Gabriela, about being with yourself and being comfortable with yourself, having to spend so much time with myself and realizing I'm never going to integrate the way that Germans feel like integration is the highest mode of immigration. Can you become German? That's the test. Can you become exactly like us? They're not really about diversity so much. I just kind of came to realize, and also came to realize in my circle of friends, many of whom are immigrants, that the more you become yourself, actually, that is a very valuable way to add to German society, which is very homogenous in a lot of ways.
Thank you so much, Emily. Yeah, homogenous. Yeah, I mean, that's like the natural trajectory for, I guess, humans, is like just finding ourselves, individualization, finally being comfortable with who we are, what we like, what we're supposed to do. And that is a question, like where we were supposed to be, we're not where we are, where are we going? Very vague, but yeah, thank you for sharing that. Well, I'm going to ask 2 last questions and anyone can answer. The first question is, when we think of global community and being a global citizen, what does that mean for you? And how do you show up as a global citizen? And then the last one is one glimmer of hope for the future. What is one thing that you're creating in your life right now that you're going to be proud of and you're cultivating for your future?
In terms of the global citizen situation or question, I think it'll be answering both questions, I hope. I think as a person who has lived, in 2 countries, let's just say I'm not so much global, but yeah, 2 different cultures. And I've made friends from different cultures as well and backgrounds, here in LA especially. I think what I've learned and what has helped me navigate different people from different backgrounds is trying not to judge anything or anyone, and be open to learning about, people and cultures that are different than what I'm used to seeing or experiencing. So the lack of judgment is hard, because I'm not saying like actively I'm judging everybody. It's just like an implicit bias that we all have, because we all have a different background and experience and just perception of life. But I think it has helped, just like we talked about earlier, like it's a muscle, right? Bad things are a muscle, but the good things too. And so just working on that muscle of being open, just hear them out. Is there something you can learn? Is there something I can learn from friends from different cultures and different customs? And that has helped me, I think, in all ways, from professional and personal life. And I think the one thing that I am doing, it's not precisely something creative, not right now at least. I've done so before, but at the moment, I think working on myself has it's work. And it is a lot of work, just going through changes and maturing and growing. I think that is something that I want to nurture more now that I will have time for that. I think if I'm okay, like, when they say in the airplane, if you're okay, put the mask on first and then you can put it on somebody else. So I feel like if I'm okay, I will have the strength and knowledge and hopefully the wisdom to help others and bring us back into, like, a diverse community, and also a community that shares what we've been talking about, which is compassion and also wanting to have a better world. So I'll just keep on working on myself. I'll let you know how it goes. But I think that will help me going to the next step and just like expand from there. Just do more and more as much as I can after that.
Gabby, how do you stay? This is not on my list, but I'm just asking because you have such amazing insight, and I really love you sharing your voice. How do you stay positive in dark times?
Well, it's hard, because in recent weeks and months, I have not been my normal positive self. I was a little bit going through like a dark phase, and it was hard for me to get out there. And what got me out of there were two things. Of course, I think it all comes from within, but I did need a little help outside of myself. And talking to family and friends who always keep me grounded helped so much, because sometimes we think we know ourselves, but others can be a good reflection of who we are, even better so than we think we know. So talking to close family and friends about, hey, I'm not feeling great. I need help. I don't know where to begin. I don't even know what I have. I don't even know why. And they didn't have all the answers, but they did help me understand who I am truly. And so, of course, I went in through like a phase of self reflection, and sometimes just not too much, because then we can get overwhelmed. But just like letting the feelings and the emotions of the negativity just like flow through. And I found ways that, like, from talking, like I mentioned, just talking about it and getting it out, because I think emotions can get stuck in our body, and that's how we get sick and all that stuff. That's like what I think. But I was just trying to flush them out. And sometimes there was just nothing I could say anymore. And so I was just like physically trying to stay still, or staying away from screens and going for a walk, just like doing healthy things that, even though they didn't make me feel better immediately, eventually, after weeks of determination of like, I need to get out of this headspace, I was able to. But something that sometimes we can't control either. So I was just trying to do my part, and the rest I sort of left it out to the universe or whatever to help me deal with it. So that's how I stay positive. And I heard something very beautiful recently, probably saw it on Instagram, that said, birds are not happy because they sing because they're happy. And I want to be like that.
Oh,
It took me a while to get it, but it has to come from within me and not from the outside. So that's what I've been doing.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to have everybody share their insight on this, but I know we're closing this out, but that's something that I didn't put this on my list, but not to diagnose anybody or anything, but we all go through tough times where we just, we're going through it. And sometimes we don't have external support. And it takes work to stay positive, stay in your body, but also not to gaslight yourself and minimize your own experience too, right? Like, give yourself permission to be like, this is a tough time for me. I'm not happy all the time. I'm going to show up to the Zoom call. I'm going to show up to work with a smile on my face because no one wants to work with a depressed teammate. Everyone has their crap that they're dealing with. There's wars breaking out. There's inflation. But I'm not feeling good. But, for like 45 minutes, I'm going to smile through it and I'm going to put on makeup. I'm going to look good. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to feel better and I'm going to get myself together. And for some of us, it's a lot harder to get ourselves together when we catch ourselves going down that dark place. And that happens to all of us. I think I just want to say it's normal and I just want to normalize it and it's safe. I mean, I don't think, in my culture, depression is like, oh my God, don't say depression. Don't say anxiety because that's a sign of weakness. I think not even acknowledging that people have moods and they go through tough times and they feel loss, grief, whether that's any kind of grief due to economic reasons, personal relationships, health crisis, whatever the case is, we're then also not acknowledging their feelings. And it's okay. It's like resiliency, like, okay, you're having a bad day. So thank you for sharing that because it is a very dark time for a lot of us. Whether or not we choose to share that with anyone, because, a lot of us are private and no one wants, like I said, I personally know for a fact that I will sit through projects with fellow team members and I may know a little bit more about them than the rest of the team knows. I may know a little bit about what they're going through than the rest of their coworkers or their friends may know. And I'm like, man, you would have fooled me. Had I not know that you're putting out this fire in your life right now, or you're dealing with this issue right now, you fooled me. Because the way you show up in the world, just like for everybody and for yourself, and people don't know, that is how, because I do that too. And I think we've all done it. So I'm just saying, just because we're having this conversation, I want to end it on, we never know what anyone's going through. So thank you for saying that. Anyone would like to add to that? Like, what does a global citizen mean? Being a global citizen mean to you? What is your one glimmer of hope for the future? What are you creating that you think will have a positive ripple effect? And how do you stay positive in these dark times? Diana.
I just wanted to add to Gabby's point. I don't know if specifically answering your questions, but it's important to also like adjust to just having to going to work like 9 to 5, 8 to 5, like every single day. So I was like, yeah, how do people, I think it was like on Threads on Instagram. So it just made me reflect on like, yeah, like really like, how do people do this for like 40 years? Like, I don't want to do this for the next 40 years. It made me think of like capitalism and all of this. And that's a whole different topic, but it just made me think that it's so important to have like little small things that, as creatives, like small things that kind of make you like looking forward to little things. Like it could be something as like changing your perspective, like about something, looking at it from a different point of view, like going on walks. Like it's very subjective, right? It depends on your personality. The idea that society has on what happiness is so it's not real to me, right? Happiness is very temporary. I'll just speak generally. Most people are striving towards like this goal of being happy. If you realize that happiness most of the time is temporary, then you can just strive towards these small like habits that like maybe bring you joy, Another thing that I wanted to add is that I recently learned to like hold two truths at once. And this came to me in like when I was doing yoga. I started to do yoga like consistently, finally, like every day. And it was something that like I was doing yoga online and the instructor was saying this quote and it reminded me of, yeah, we can do that. It can be good and bad. Like we can hold these two truths at once. we can be sad and happy. And I think it applies a lot to my writing sometimes, because it's a very like love-hate relationship sometimes when I'm stuck. But I mean, you can apply to anything in life if you really think about it.
Tiana, one of the things that you said about like holding these parallel truths at the same time. There's a yoga instructor of mine who always says, if you ask, is yoga supposed to hurt? Is this, getting in this posture, is it supposed to be painful? And she'll say jein, which is, ja and nein, yes and no in German, which is sort of like the position of yoga is you should be stretching yourself. You should be building a muscle. You should be moving beyond, which is painful. But at the same time, you don't want to like cause yourself an injury, which is sort of like these two truths. And also just as true about personal growth in so many ways, is that at the same time that you're pushing yourself farther, it's going to push you out of your comfort zone. And maybe that is like sort of a roundabout way of saying how to be a global citizen, because I think about the best way that I can think of to be a global citizen is wherever I go, wherever I am, wherever home is to me on this day or at this time, I really want to be cognizant of what can I offer? How can I be generous? How can I live in a way that's not just about like me being here, but how can I contribute something? And here in my place in Berlin, I have one room. I live in like a tiny studio, but my next door neighbor has tons of space. And he's also my landlord, and he has a guest room, but never has guests. So he's always like, you can use my guest room if you ever have guests. So I have sort of inherited a guest bedroom where when anybody who comes to Berlin and needs a place to stay can always stay with me, because I have sort of like an assistant guest bedroom. And I love that that's just like, it's not just my generosity, it's also the generosity of my neighbor. And it's sort of like, it multiplies in that way.
Yes, Berlin. Amazing. Sam, did you want to add to that before we close out?
I'll keep it short, simple, and in line with the other ladies. I think that I just try to be conscious of the things that I do and how they impact others. So both immediately and in the future. So whether it's, hey, let me do some things to reduce my carbon footprint, I'll do those things. If I forget, I'm not going to beat myself up, but I'll try to pick up and start fresh the next time. And then also, because I'm not a mother, but I am an aunt, and I have been majority of my life, I try to set examples for the kids who will be that generation leading the country. They will be the generation taking care of us. And so setting a good example for them also is my contribution to being a good global citizen, because I hope that they will pick up on some of my better habits, not the bad ones, but the better ones. And outside of that, I just try not to worry too much. It's, if I do a little bit of good, some of the times it'll add up. And I hope that it makes a difference.
Well, thank you. Well, did you take away anything inspiring today? Did you listen with your heart? Tune in next time. Till then, I'm Farida. This is the Slow Dive Podcast. Let's make an impact, one episode at a time.